All right, so in this video, I just want to go over really quickly how to cut out, for example, these inside designs of this music note. Now, we have mentioned this many times with different designer templates. Whenever we have these cutouts, you can either approach them as like a doodling or as a stencil, where you may trace out, for example, this mouth onto another piece of paper, and then you would layer that on top, right? So typically when you see these cutouts, that's generally how we approach them. Now, specifically talking about this little face cutout, I would just absolutely use this as a placeholder, or I would take a fine point pen and doodle that onto, say, whatever paper I cut a circle out of, like yellow paper or something. So that one, pretty simple. I would use them as a doodling. This one though, this one is a little bit different than what we typically talk about, whether it's doodling or stenciling. This one I do think does require a little bit more cutout, although there are some more samples in the gallery showcasing various ways how this may be created with and designed with. I want to share with you really quickly just how you may approach cutting that out. So first off, we want to, of course, trace it onto a piece of paper. I'm just going to use some black cardstock here, and I'm going to take my pencil and trace that on. Now, you'll want to trace the outside, of course, and then you'll also want to trace these inside spaces as well. All right, so top and bottom. Then at that point, what I would do is I would detach this, and although I don't use an X-Acto knife often, I would pull in an X-Acto knife, something that you are a fan of. There's slice or just a typical X-Acto knife of some kind. And I would cut the insides out before I cut the outsides. And typically I just recommend this because before you kind of like weaken, by cutting the outside, you kind of like weaken the paper, so to speak. I think it's good to always do the little details where you can before you do kind of the exterior of that design. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, and we would just follow kind of the lines here. And I do think it's important to know, you know, depending on what X-Acto knife you're using, to kind of not push hard enough, but you know, not too hard either. I think that's the trick to X-Acto knives. Now I will say, see, not hard enough. This is why X-Acto knives are not my favorite thing to work with. I'll be honest. They really are not my favorite thing to work with. And I don't recommend them often because of what I see as a process. I do like this thumb one, and I think it's just because the grip naturally lets you be able to press around those edges. And then of course, whatever rough edges you have, that's where I would probably just take a dauber, some ink, and smooth those out. Okay, so really quickly before I do the same thing over here, I do want to point out, if you're more comfortable with like a small pair of scissors, for example, this can be great for details too. So you don't have to have an X-Acto knife. I wanted to share with you an X-Acto knife, but in detail point of view, you can use just the tip of scissors, right? Poke it in like I did, and then I just take the point of the scissors and just slowly kind of go around that. So for me, there's not much difference between that and an X-Acto knife. Now I'm going to take my larger scissors because this got a nice fine point tip, and I'm just going to do the same things. Most of the time, I don't switch my scissors up. A lot of people have suggested these small scissors in the community, and although I do think they are designed for details, I find that this point, if you're using a nice pair of scissors with a nice fine point, does something similar to what a small pair of scissors would do. But if you feel like the handle or the size of the handle, you know, of the scissors is more complex to get into the spaces, then totally understandable. But still with this design, I think preferably, I prefer a pair of scissors. I still do. So after all of that with the X-Acto knife, I thought I would share that. Now granted, you may see other people recommending in the community an X-Acto knife for situations like this, even where you probably do want to cut those pieces out versus like doodling or treating it like a stencil. But I still think basic little cutting technique there will accomplish it without having to have another additional tool, or maybe you're like me where I just, X-Acto knives just are a hit and miss for me. They're a hit and miss sometimes. So it just depends, I guess, on your preference and even sometimes your mood, I would say. Sometimes your mood. Are you wanting to kind of approach something or kind of stay in your comfort zone? And for me, these scissors, of course, we've been through a lot together. It's definitely my comfort zone, and it always does the trick. It's just more about the cutting technique as far as when you come in for details, just sticking to the tip versus a lot of times we talk about cutting borders, we say stick to the back of your scissors. With details, you want to stick to the tip of your scissors, and then just slow down your cuts a little bit. So there's a close look. Let us know if you guys have any questions. Can't wait to see what you create with this set. Make sure to share it with us in the community. Thanks, guys.